Welcome to Connecting the Community podcast. I am your host, Marj Andre. I will be connecting you with people, organizations, and events that create community in and around Richmond Hill, a very culturally diverse community with lots of trees and streams and interesting people. On this podcast, I'm talking with Wendy Morihovitis. She is a recently retired mechanical engineer and looking for something to get involved with when she retired. She stumbled across this organization, Fair Vote Canada, and she is now a volunteer with this organization. I had her talk to my Connecting the Community group last week, and we definitely agreed that we needed to do a podcast. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thanks, March.
Oh, I'm very glad we found the time to do this podcast. I have lots of questions, lots of things I want you to explain. I think this is an important and interesting topic. But Wendy, is there anything else we should know about you, that you are a dedicated runner?
I always like to talk about running. Yeah, so just on that, I started running when I turned 18 and I quit smoking because I had, in high school, smoking was cool back in the day. So my goal now is to keep running into my 80s. So it's not about speed, it's about injury prevention. But I find, getting out and a little bit of motion is really good for just about everything. So I really love that.
Okay, thank you for that, sharing that. Now, let's start by describing what Fair Vote Canada is.
Fair Vote Canada is a nonpartisan national citizens campaign for democratic improvement. It's a lot of big words, but it's not that complicated. We want to implement proportional representation. We're a grassroots initiative. As people learn about electoral system possibilities for Canada, they often get involved with Fair Vote. That's what happened to me. I knew there was something wrong. I didn't know what it was.
Okay. So what was it that really caught your interest in this organization? Did you know people there or at all?
No, I knew I was going to retire, and I looked for something that could have an impact in Canada and, specifically for the future of my 3 kids. Proportional representation makes it possible for young people in Canada to have a voice and to have real influence on that future. So I decided that Fair Vote Canada is where I wanted to channel my post-retirement energy.
Okay. So talking about post, I think we need to first define what first past the post is. I sort of see it as a fish that can't see it's in water. I think for many of us Canadians, that's all we know.
Yeah. And, for a long time, the common philosophy was it was good enough for Confederation, so it's good enough for now. But everything evolves, right? We get smarter and things get more complex, so we can have some change. So let's talk about the federal terminology here. So I'll talk about MPs. We have 343 ridings in Canada with about the same population in each. That's the concept of the ridings. First past the post is a winner-take-all electoral system. So each riding counts the distribution of votes, and the winner represents that riding. So that it's quite simple. It's a simple, cheap, easy way to do an election. But if you think, we typically have, about 5 parties in each riding. So you only need about 35% of the vote to win. So that means about 65% of voters are not represented. Their votes don't go anywhere. Once you select the winner, those votes are done. So that's the challenge with first past the post. You don't need a majority to win your riding. You just need more than the other people.
Okay. Now, most countries, democratic countries, do not use the first past the post system. Is that correct?
Yes. There's over 130 democracies in the world that use proportional representation systems. And that includes countries like New Zealand, Ireland, Germany, Denmark, all the Scandinavian countries. There's a really long list, and it's been around for a really long time. Belgium was the first country to do that in 1899.
So can you just name the couple other ones that do use the first past the post?
3 primary countries that use first past the post are Canada, the US, and the UK.
Okay. I think that's important to remember. Is it correct to say that there are various iterations of proportional representations? Like it's not the same in each country, and we have regional seats and riding seats. Maybe you
Yep.
can walk us through that.
Sure. So proportional representation itself just means the percent of votes is reflected in the percent of seats. So it's a result of the system. There's many different systems to get us there. One of the common ones is called mixed member proportional, and it's a lot easier to describe when I have my slides with my rabbits and turtles and cats.
Mhm.
But if you think about a way to do it in Canada, take 5 ridings that we have now and put them into a region and make that region have 3 ridings. Then each riding, you have an election, everybody votes. You take those 3 ridings and you look at who wins each riding by first past the post kind of concept. So typically you'll have about 40%. Those 3 MPs will be declared. Then you look at your total vote distribution across that region and you use the 2 regional seats to balance it out. So instead of your 65% of your voters not getting representation, they will find representation at the regional level that is still for them, physically a little further away, but email, phone calls, Zoom meetings, you can make plenty of contact. And the idea is that in an individual riding, you have your direct riding rep, and then you have 2 regional reps. So you get better representation through mixed member proportional.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. So, can you talk about some of the benefits of having proportional representation?
So one of the hallmarks of proportional representation is you hardly ever get majority governments. You end up with, because your vote is spread out across different parties, the party that has the most votes has to form coalitions with other parties. So you get cooperation instead of opposition. Collaboration and cooperation is the hallmark, and there's less polarization. And it also means we get better alignment with voter priorities, because when a government is implementing a policy that is supported by the majority of the members of parliament, it's also supported by the majority of voters. Some additional things that come with PR is you just get a higher quality of democratic life, including much higher voter turnout, more prudent fiscal management, better environmental management, reduced income inequality. Overall, it's a society that is pulling together instead of fighting.
Okay, I like that. Now, another term you threw out to our group was false majorities. Is it basically that the popular vote doesn't equal transfer to the seats and there's division you can have?
That can be. False majorities can be 2 kinds, but in
Okay.
general, a false majority, it's normal in Canada. And if you think about voter experience, our election experience, the last time we had a true majority government, which means more than 50% of the voters voted for the majority, was 1984. So all of the majorities we've had since then were false. How that happens to us is we are fortunate to have a breadth of political parties. That's important in politics, that you want to be able to find the party that aligns with what you want. You don't want to be wedged into one or the other, like we see south of the border. You typically, with first past the post, you can win your riding with 35 to 40% of the vote. So you only need that much to win a seat. And if a party, because the parties are good at this, they spread their votes across the riding, so they only want 40%. They're not aiming for 50 or 60%. If they can get 40% across enough ridings, then they'll win a majority. So our majority governments historically are typically 40% of the vote. And that's both federal, provincial, and in territories.
Okay.
Their false majority is our norm, and we don't realize it.
Yes, we don't. Lots to learn. Now, there is also the issue that there are a few swing ridings. And so a relatively small number of votes determine who has power. Can you elaborate on this?
I think many Canadian ridings, we have 343. Many of our ridings return an MP from the same party election after election. For example, I grew up in Sarnia. It's a small town in Ontario, and Sarnia has returned a Conservative MP since 2006. So Sarnia is considered a safe seat for the Conservative Party. And remember, I am nonpartisan. I'm just talking about the reality of our politics, okay? So the riding I live in now is a swing riding. We go back and forth between Conservative and Liberal, and the vote difference is small, sometimes only a few hundred votes. So from a political party perspective, they put time and energy and money into the swing ridings. The other ridings will already deliver. So they consider those seats to be safe. They focus on their swing ridings to get their little bit extra to give them the seat. And if you look at our 2011 federal election, we had 14.7 million votes. We had 14 swing ridings. So out of all of those ridings, only 14 historically switched back and forth. And 6,201 votes made the difference, and we had a false majority government. So if those 6,201 out of almost 15 million voters, if they had voted the other way, we would have had a false majority in the other direction.
Whoa, that is a sobering statistic.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Whoa. Okay. Something that I think is extremely important that proportional representation can avoid is policy lurch. It's another word you threw out at us that had us all sitting up straight. What are you talking about? And then when you explained it, we went, ooh. So, I don't think everyone is familiar, really familiar with this concept. So please define it and give us an example.
So we're not familiar with the term, but we are all very familiar with the experience because it happens all the time in Canada. And if you say a government is going to flip-flop every 4 years, okay, sometimes it's 8, let's just say 4. You go from left to right to left to right to left to right. And each time your government flips, they cancel everything the previous government did and start on a new cycle of policy. And those cancellations cost us money. They waste time. We make no progress. So that's what policy lurch is. And because you have a false majority, you have a government going ahead with its majority of seats, making policy that majority of the voters don't like. So in the election cycle, everybody's mad. Your new government comes in, they cancel the things they promised to cancel during the divisive election cycle, and then they start over. So policy lurch is just back and forth, wasting our money and time, and no progress on what we need to happen in the country. So an example, because I am in Ontario, an example is our Ontario energy policy. So this example goes from 2001 to 2023. And as I talk through it, keep in mind that all the governments making these decisions were false majorities. Okay, so 40% of the vote-ish, more than 50% of the seats. They do what they want, even though there's a good chance that the majority of the voters do not agree. So we have an announcement in 2001 that the government is going to replace coal-fired power plants with cleaner natural gas plants. The election comes up. There's one or two important swing ridings that say they don't want that in their ridings. So the government cancels the contracts so they can still win their election because they have to keep their few hundred votes in each of those ridings. And we're stuck with a $300 million lawsuit for canceling one of the gas plants in Mississauga. There's an auditor's report in 2013 that estimated that we will pay $1.1 billion for contract cancellations because of this flip-flop from coal to gas and then back to coal. So the government gets back in. They want to continue with their green policy. So they announce that they're going to go ahead with wind and solar. And they have a couple of election cycles to do that. But when it comes around to the 2019 election, the opposition party campaigns on the excessive cost of wind and solar and challenges to, climate change and other issues. And they promise to cancel that wind and solar. And when they get into power, they do that. That cost us, that was 2019, that cost us another $231 million as companies sue us for canceled contracts. And we have a German company who's also coming out and demanding another $100 million. So this is all canceled contract legal costs. We had a chance in 2022 for a battery plant in Windsor. This company called LG Chemical wanted to build a $2.5 billion, 1,000 job battery manufacturing plant, but they couldn't do it because the region doesn't have the electrical capacity to host a plant like that. So as we've been going back and forth on our energy policy, and wasting millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars. We have made no progress and we don't have enough electrical supply. And now in 2022, 2023, the government announces that they're going to go back and build gas plants. So we have gone full cycle now. We still haven't made any investment, any meaningful investment. So that's just one province and one policy. And that's why proportional representation and the consensus and collaboration it can bring is so important for us, because we cannot afford to continue like this.
So how would there be this shift from first past the post to some form of proportional representation?
Historically, how it's happened is the political parties come to an agreement that they need a better electoral system, and they go from whatever they were, possibly first past the post, to a proportional representation system, which again is the result. So for us to get that in Canada, what we advocate for in Fair Vote is that we would have a citizens' assembly, which is a formal process where you have a company that facilitates these kind of think tanks. They pull together Canadians from all areas of the country, demographics, regions, history in the country, and they study with support from experts and advocates. What do we have now? What could we have? What does the data tell us? And they make a recommendation back to the parties or to the government on what would be best for us. In Fair Vote, we want a citizens' assembly on what would be the best proportional representation system for us. When we get that recommendation back from the Citizens Assembly, then the government works with the other parties and they implement it. You don't have to have a referendum. You don't have to have a constitutional change. All you have to do is implement it through legislation.
So I do believe we need to be asking our elected officials, both at the provincial and the federal level, what would it take to get this change happening? I think there needs to be a request. It's not just going to happen. Would it be necessary that the change happen at both levels of government?
No, it can happen in a province and spread, or it could happen federally and spread. If you think back to universal healthcare, we got universal healthcare across the country because it started in Saskatchewan. And, I talk about Fair Vote is a grassroots citizen organization. Healthcare came out of a grassroots citizen initiative from farmers in Saskatchewan who insisted they needed fair and accessible healthcare. And then we had a politician, Tommy Douglas, who stepped up and took on a lead role and worked on and made it happen. So we need the same thing, but it could start anywhere. It could start in Saskatchewan, and then it gets proven and we all realize this is a good thing. Let's follow.
I'm going to put the Fair Vote Canada website in the podcast notes and your email because you would like to talk to other people. I think when we have the interaction and have this chart with the bunnies and rabbits and cats jumping around, it worked well. You also had us take a poll of what type of pizza we wanted, and that really, I thought, was effective too. So that sort of interaction, I think, drives the point home well. So I'm going to really ask people to consider, are they part of a group that you could go and speak to? So thank you for doing that.
I'd love to do that, Marj. I really think this is important for us to understand.
Yeah, definitely it is. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, maybe one thing. Grassroots means we have to get the word out, talk to your politicians. If somebody comes to your door, somebody calls you, you don't have to wait for an election either. You can also go in and talk to your MP or your provincial rep and just tell them you want proportional representation. We're tired of the waste that first past the post creates. We're tired of the division, the polarization. We want a community that works together for a better future for all of us. And first past the post is a barrier. Proportional representation would give us a chance to make better decisions and make better progress.
Now, I do end the podcasts asking the same question of all podcast guests. I'd like you to name one thing you really like about this community.
So I actually live in Aurora, but we're all the same, right?
Yeah.
And this summer, I made friends with somebody who hikes all over York Region. And I've lived in Aurora for 30 years. I didn't know. We have trails everywhere, beautiful woods, some hills, some flat, trees and fields. And it's such a gift for us to have that in our region, in our province. I think it's a beautiful thing in our community, and I hope we are able to keep them.
Thank you for that. I too enjoy these trails and are out
Yes.
often. So, thank you for reminding us of how fortunate we are. Well, thank you, Wendy, for taking the time to do this podcast. And I will check back in with you and see what progress we're making. And let's hope we're celebrating.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you, Marge.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening. I would appreciate you sharing this podcast. Consider emailing me at Marj, M-A-R-J, at marjandre.com. I would welcome suggestions for podcast guests. Let's stay connected.